Oregon State and Washington State are building back to Pac-12. Or are they actually? Is this just leverage to join the Big 12 or the ACC? This is Locked On Big 12.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Tuesday, everybody. Welcome to Locked On Big 12. I'm Drake Toll from America's #1 Big 12 podcast, Locked On Big 12. Thank you for making this show your first listen every single day. Today, we talk to my favorite person in the world, Spencer McLaughlin of Locked On College Football. We don't hate each other. And we're going to knock out Washington State, Oregon State, rebuilding the Pac-12, or are they leveraging to join the Big 12 and the ACC? Also, 5 teams can still win the Big 12 football title. We'll talk about that. And then I'll be joined by TJ Pittenger to talk Baylor, Colorado, a wild football game between 2 football teams. If you hit subscribe, I get to keep my job. Spencer McLaughlin, Washington State, Oregon State.
2 football teams to describe Baylor, Colorado. God, that's the perfect way to look at it.
Which, might I say,
they're football teams.
I couldn't have said that. I'd be like, 2 groups of men will square off, but I will dub them football teams based on them both being 2-1, which is better than West Virginia and Kansas records right now. That's a moot point. Washington State, Oregon State are rebuilding the Pac-12 right now. Is that just a move to leverage further expansion talks with larger conferences when or if the Big 12 decides to add, when or if the ACC loses schools and needs to backfill further?
Yes, but not exclusively. The long-term play for Oregon State and Washington State is to get into one of the Power 4 leagues if they stick around, or if there is a dramatic fault line shift in college athletics that causes there to be an AFC, NFC type structure, and there are only 2 conferences, and they're saying, okay, let's include everybody we can in here and then split you up into, separate regionally based groups. We could call it like divisions or like conferences. I don't know, something like that. And if you were to look at how Oregon State, Washington State get themselves into that fold, you got to play as many big games as you possibly can. You have to win as many games as you possibly can. So that's their long-term play. But that's like early 2030s, Drake. That's a long time from now. So you got to figure out 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. That's a lot of seasons. And so even if the league rebuilt in the form that they're pursuing, which is 4 Mountain West teams for now, and they're talking to Tulane and Memphis, trying to get them to jump over from the American Conference, even if that league only exists for 7 to 8 years, it will have been worth it if you get into the next league. But that AFC NFC type league that I mentioned. But that doesn't mean that the league can't just exist, because what if this happens, Drake? What if there isn't an eventual merger into 2 leagues and then everybody gets set up like the NFL? What if the 4 power conferences remain? What if all the group of 5 conferences remain? Then what do you want to have? Access to the playoff and the best league that you can possibly play in, that is the most competitive, that gives you the most money, that gives you the most relevance, and gives you the best access to the playoff. And that's what the Pac-12 is. So it is simultaneously a springboard option while also being a fallback plan.
Overall, is this a short-term play then? We mentioned a lot about the long-term. Oregon State, Washington State want to be as relevant as possible. Is rebuilding the Pac-12 with mostly Mountain West schools then a short-term play? Because it in no way gives you the publicity of being in a Big 12 or ACC if you're those 2 schools.
It's define short-term.
2030. Like 2030 being,
yes.
we are trying to get ourselves out of the Pac-12 by 2030.
Yes. That is going to be their number one objective. Forever and always, get in the Big 12, get in the ACC, or be included in 2 mega conferences. That's their long-term goal. That's an if, though, as I mentioned, because there's no guarantee that comes together. There can be plenty of logic to it, but there are a lot of logistical hurdles that have to take place. You'd have to essentially dissolve the Big 12 and the ACC, and then everyone would go into the Big 10 and the SEC, and then you'd figure it out from there. And that's a lot to work out. Doesn't mean it can't be done, but a lot of steps have to happen between now and then. So yes, they are trying to get into the Big 12 or into the ACC, and this is a way to do that. It doesn't mean that that's their only path towards playing college football at a level that allows them access to the playoff. It doesn't mean it's the only way they can play college football with solid viewership to make some money and, have what you would consider a successful football program that contributes to your athletic department. It's not the only way. It's just the best way, which is why I think it's where their focus is. They got to maximize visibility. They've got to stay competitive financially, and then they have to be competitive on the football field. And so far, the early returns are quite good. I know Oregon State got blasted by the Ducks over the weekend, but Oregon State's still going to be a solid team. And Washington State has beaten 2 Power 4 teams. Like, tell me why Washington State isn't ranked right now.
Yeah.
Tell me. I don't see it. I don't see why they're not. They should be, and I think they're being robbed of it.
There is a world in which 2 years from now, Washington State wins the new Pac-12 that has 8 teams or 10 teams, and they finish the year at 10-3 as conference champions. We've seen Utah do that a couple of times. And the Sun Belt champion, Texas State, is 12-1, winning their league. And Texas State makes it in over Washington State. You're playing with fire when you're looking for a 5th spot that isn't guaranteed to your conference. Is that something? There doesn't seem to me to be enough stability for Washington State and Oregon State with a Pac-12 to want to stay there long term. That's to back up your point. Am I off base there? I mean, they can't go to the college football playoff this year. They're going to have to do something now.
They could if they go 12-0.
They won't win a conference championship.
No, but you can still get in as an at-large.
Oh, that's right. We have 12 teams now, don't we?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have 12 teams. They can't get an auto bid.
Yeah.
But if they went 12-0, which I don't think happens, Washington State still has to go at Boise, at Fresno, at Oregon State. I think you probably lose at least one of those games, and you have to avoid stumbles elsewhere. Remember, they started 4-0. They were ranked number 13 last year, and then they ended the season 1-7 down the stretch. So we'll see how they finish out. But I mean, yeah, if they go 12-0, they could absolutely get in. Because they'd have a blowout win over a Big 12 team. They'd have a tight win over a Big 10 team, and then they will have beaten everybody else. And that's of course going to get consideration. Doesn't mean they'll get there, but they'll be considered.
As they're pushing for those two, what does it take then? What does it take for Washington State and Oregon State to get into the ACC or the Big 12?
You have to have those conferences get to the point where they need more teams, probably competing with each other. Because there is no universe, there are no realignment moves, even Florida State, Clemson, that allow the Big 12 or ACC to get close to the Big 10 or the SEC. Competitively, brand-wise, television ratings, financially. Can't happen. You can't do it. So what you would need is the ACC or the Big 12 to kind of fight things out for the next 6-7 years as to who's the number 3 league in the country. Who's that next team, or not next team, next conference after the Big 10 and SEC, and eventually they need to say, hey, we want to pass that league over there, because when our media rights value gets determined, when we go back to market again with the television companies, we want to get more than them over there because we want to give our schools a better chance to go compete for national championships. So that's what you would need first and foremost. Secondly, you have to be successful over the next half decade plus. You cannot afford to be mediocre in college football with this schedule. You have to be near the top of the rebuilt Pac-12 just about every year. Doesn't mean you have to win every single season, but you need to put together a couple conference championships. You need to push for the college football playoff. You need to continue to get Power 4 games. You need to continue to win Power 4 football games as well. I think those are the two most fundamental points that they have to hit if they're going to get into the Big 12 or the ACC one day.
Yeah, for Big 12 fans screaming into the void right now that this move could put us with the SEC, but there is one move where the Big 12 could make $40-50 million per school, and that is not in realignment. It is in private equity. Anything in realignment you do is not going to push you close to those top two. That is an objective fact, which is redundant. Spencer McLaughlin, thanks for joining Locked On Big 12.
I appreciate that you said something that is just the fact there. And it's going to be very controversial in the YouTube comments, but you can't get close to the Big 10 or the SEC. Don't think of it that way. Look at the ACC. That's your competitor. Thanks, Drake. That was fun.
Keep in mind, Spencer's mom reads every single comment, so be nice. Coming up, 5 teams can still win the Big 12 football title. Let's break that one down. Why did I thank you? You're going to be right back. This is Locked On Big 12, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by a brand new sponsor of Locked On, Roy. Have you heard about Roy? It stands for Return on You, and it's a new platform to get you, the fans, involved in NIL like never before. By supporting players directly, you can help shape rosters, retain talent, and keep your favorite athletes out of the transfer portal. Roy changes the NIL game for fans. Directly support players right now allows you to directly pick your favorite college athletes, and with Roy, fans can play a key role in shaping the future of their favorite teams. Also, exclusive content access. When fans contribute to a successful campaign, they receive an access to exclusive content from an athlete, such as their announcement decision, behind-the-scenes footage, and other personal reflections, all of which are available only to the fans who supported the athlete. Download Roy for iOS or Android and enter the referral code Locked On, and you'll be automatically entered to win a $5,000 cash sweepstakes. Visit Roy.com for additional details. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited. Get the Roy app for iOS and Android. Get off the sidelines and into the NIL game with Roy.
The Big 12 is the most open conference championship race in the country. We thought that coming into the year, and boy, we think that through the first 3 weeks of the season. Drake Toll, Locked On Big 12, returning to join me here on the show. Drake, I want to say Utah will figure it out, but at this point, I don't know if I can trust Cam Rising to stay on the field as much as I can trust Jamarcus Russell to read a playbook. So what are you making of the Big 12 right now? Because teams like BYU, who we're going to talk about later in today's show, they're kind of tossing their hat into the ring, sort of, kind of, maybe. TCU and UCF both look good. Who's winning this conference?
Yeah, Utah at this point is still number one in my power rankings. And I'm not sure if you can take them away. They were there preseason. They were the fancy pick from the national media to win the Big 12. They were the best roster on paper, and they still have that by and large. There have been injuries already on the defense that are hurting Utah, and with Cam Rising out, this is not the same football team. Isaac Wilson stepped up in the second half, looked a lot better against Utah State, and showed you he can be a more competent backup option than anybody they had last year as they were rotating a couple of guys trying to win in 2023. You can find more continuity with Wilson. However, he's not Cam Rising. And without Cam Rising, I cannot trust Utah. With him, we haven't learned yet. He's played four quarters of football this season so far. And in those 4 quarters, I haven't looked and said, all right, that is the quarterback that makes the difference in the Big 12 so far. However, again, still number one in my power rankings. But then there's Kansas State, Avery Johnson. Every third throw is one of the worst throws I've seen in college football. Oh, he's open. And then Avery Johnson just sails it to the hot girl in the third row of the student section. But the other 2 throws, and one of the 3 is going to be an elite pass, and the kid can run for days. Oklahoma State, Alan Bowman leads the conference in passing yards. And
I'm trying not to say anything. I'm struggling with that being a real stat through more than one game.
Because we sat here weeks ago and last week and the week before that and said, Alan Bowman's not going to push the needle. And I still don't think Alan Bowman pushes the needle more than Avery Johnson or Cam Rising, but he has played his role to this point, and the stats line up. And granted, they're not playing world beaters or even the top tier of the Big 12 or teams equivalent yet, but Oklahoma State is still certainly a player. Now, UCF, I like KJ Jefferson a lot. Same thing as Avery Johnson. Every third pass, he just throws it right into the ground. Like, I'm going to spike it. But then again, those 13 completions he had, there were clutch moments where he leads his team back from 28-7 on the road to win a football game. And his legs, he can run for days. Iowa State, don't forget them. They're a player in winning the Big 12 Conference. Rocco Beck, Abu Sama, Jalen Knoll. They showed you that offense can score 20 points in one half against Iowa. They are dangerous enough to win the Big 12. And then you already mentioned, you have the BYUs, the TCUs, even a sneaky, could Arizona put a couple things together, not based on the way they played against Kansas State, but still they've got the offensive talent. And Arizona State has maybe the best running back in the conference in Cam Scatterbo. At least he's shown that he can be that kind of playmaker for the Sun Devils. The Big 12's got 5 teams to me that can win the conference right now, and another 2, 3, 4 that can vie for it.
Arizona is not one of those teams to me. I didn't feel that way about them coming into the year. They have backed that up through 3 games with a bad defensive showing, a bad offensive showing, and a bad overall showing once they played a real football team. And I know that Noah Fafita and T-Mac are great, but I felt this watching the Kansas State game on Friday night, Drake, that Arizona has got the 11-4 connection and literally nothing else that they can rely on.
Yeah.
I don't see anything else. And then I texted this to you after the game ended. My takeaway from UCF going to TCU and winning in what was just an incredible football game, really disappointing for Sonny Dykes Horned Frogs to blow a 28-7 lead at home. My takeaway, Drake, is that both of those teams are good. We talked about TCU being one of the most underrated teams in the country, certainly the most underrated in the Big 12 entering this season. I think Josh Hoover is legit. I think UCF with Gus Malzahn is exactly what I thought they'd be. Yeah. I thought they'd lose the football game. It's a coin flip, go either way. I think Arizona comes down from the conference title contending ring. Utah could if Cam Rising's not going to be healthy. And I think both UCF and TCU can catapult themselves into that conversation.
Yeah, in the Arizona conversation, I'm not too high on them, but I'm still going to leave them in the category, in that middle of the pack category. Got to remember, the 5 teams that I named didn't feature Arizona, and past that, the 6 through 9 range feature a whole lot of squads that are at least comparable. They have that one glaring hole, whether it be offensively or defensively or inconsistent performances. And as for TCU, Spencer, they threw the ball 53 times, and UCF threw the ball 22 times. That stat right there is not conducive to a 28-7 comeback for UCF. Why was TCU still throwing the football in this game? They ran the ball 17 times for 58 yards all game. That is coaching malpractice. You are up 28-7. Just run the football. And that guy with the last name Briles, son of Art Briles, former coach at Baylor, and feels like half the TCU staff has some connection to that staff, goes, ha, we can throw it through the air and stop the clock. And that's exactly what they did. They never established the ground game. And when you're up by 21 points and your opponent's rushing for nearly 300, you have got to do, he's gashing your defense on the ground. Gus Malzahn is, you have got to do something to run some clock. And TCU didn't.
I share the concern about the defense and the run game, but when you have an explosive pass game, that's what Sonny Dykes' team was a couple years ago.
I'm not that worried about the TCU defense. And even watching this game in the second half, I was like, yeah, there was a breakdown, no doubt. But the offense was like, look at us. We can throw the ball and keep our defense on the sideline for 1 minute and 15 seconds. And that doesn't help a defense that needed help.
Every time I've watched Josh Hoover play, I've been impressed. And
God bless, that kid's good.
He's good. I think he's really good. I think he's really, really good. 2 teams that are not really good that, well, one of them still could be, perhaps. What is happening to our Kansas Jayhawks, Drake? What in the world is going on? You talk about one of the most disappointing teams in college football this season. I talked about NC State yesterday. I talked about Kansas. I'm sure West Virginia fans are really disappointed with the 1-2 start that they have. I predicted them to start 1-2, and so I'm not particularly shocked that West Virginia is regressing back from what they were a season ago. But these 2 teams square off this week, and just let this go through your head, everybody, in Big 12 land out there. One of these fan bases is going to be 1-3. 1-3 after this game, which is in Morgantown. I think the loser can kiss their Big 12 championship hopes goodbye, because if Kansas, you're not winning this game, you can only lose one more to get in the conference title game, and you need some help. And boy, it just doesn't feel like you're going to have the team to do that if you lose your 3rd consecutive ball game. What do you make of the Mountaineers and the Jayhawks this week?
This is the we might really, really suck bowl. And whoever loses this game really, really sucks. And West Virginia was bad under Neil Brown for a couple of years, and Kansas was bad for more than that in the last 2 decades. This game is...
Can you please use a word stronger than bad to describe Kansas before Leipold got there and got things going?
Yeah, putrid, like doormat, bottom of the barrel, losing to FCS teams every year. 1-11 was a miracle. West Virginia, this is a keep your job game for Neil Brown, as last week kind of was too. The way they lost, everyone points and goes, how do we give up 14 points in the last 4 minutes? That guy. And goes back to the Neil Brown 2022 when you thought that he was dead to rights. And for Kansas, Lance Leipold is obviously very safe. They could go 2-10 and he would still be very, very safe in Lawrence. But this game it puts a big question mark on Jeff Grimes, the offensive coordinator. So each school has at least one coach represented in this game that's on the chopping block if they lose.
Drake Toll, Locked On Big 12. Appreciate it. That is going to be an exciting game.
Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel's where I go to make money. I say, hey, FanDuel, I want BYU to beat SMU. Hey, FanDuel, I want BYU to cover against Wyoming. Hey, FanDuel, I want Texas Tech to beat the brakes off North Texas. And FanDuel says, do it. And they have something different for you. Now through Saturday, September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. That is until September 22nd. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Visit FanDuel.com to download America's #1 sportsbook. That's FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. Visit them. Do it today.
So let's talk about Baylor. Let's start there. 2-1, played Utah decently, you know, maybe better than people expected. Obviously won 2 games that people would say like, well, yeah, you've got to win the 2 games that you did. But what's the mood right now around Baylor? You know, what are your thoughts on them? How do you assess them to start the year? Not to play the moral victory game against Utah, but just thoughts around them.
Yeah, I think if you're a Baylor fan right now, you still don't exactly know how good this team is, but you're excited with what the defense has done. They have allowed the fewest passing yards of any team in the Big 12. Part of that's because you played Air Force, and they don't really throw the ball. But then again, Air Force has been a machine. It's the first time in nearly 2 decades that a non-service academy has held Air Force without a touchdown in regulation. That is a massive stat for a Baylor squad whose defense was so poor as last year. 115 in overall defense in the country, and now this season they can actually stop opposing teams. And the offense was abysmal against Utah and terrible in the first half against Air Force last week, but the saving grace is that Sawyer Robertson is now at quarterback. You had DeQuan Finn, the MAC player of the year, who was going to come in and save the day for the Baylor Bears, and he didn't necessarily do it. He was banged up last week, and the way that Sawyer Robertson played in the second half against Air Force, I think you're going to have to leave him in that QB spot. If you're a Bears fan, you're excited. You've played 3 teams. The only legitimate squad you played, you lost to fairly badly in Salt Lake, and if Cam Rising had been healthy the full game, you probably would have lost worse. But at 2-1, You're not upset right now, despite last week being, listen to this, TJ, listen to this. Last week's first half against Air Force, it was punt, field goal, punt, fumble, missed field goal, turnover on downs, field goal, fumble, punt, fumble, field goal. 6-3 score. One of the wildest, ugliest first halves that I've seen, but based on the last 2 quarters that Baylor has played, they feel like they're in a good spot.
So I know you're intimately close to the Big 12, obviously covering all things Big 12 there for Locked On. Let's talk about Colorado, a new addition to the Big 12. Haven't played a conference game yet, but did, survived, it felt like, against North Dakota State, although if not for a weird interception and kind of a garbage time touchdown, they kind of win going away, I think, in that first one. Absolutely shell-shocked, embarrassed by Nebraska. That Nebraska front was just way too much. And then, I'm not trying to read into the Colorado State win too much, but that was a team that took them to the wire last year, and you certainly felt like they were a little bit better against them this year on the road versus at home. What are your thoughts around Colorado so far?
I still don't think Colorado State is a very good football team, and this is not a quality road win like it would be to go to the likes of a Tulane, as Kansas State did a couple of weeks ago. And the win against North Dakota State, while they're an FCS school, they're one of the best, and there's a value to that. You win that home game, you open the season on a high note. You're 2-1 right now. That Nebraska loss being the game that everybody looked at Colorado and said, hey, we're asking questions about this football program, and they're questions that are deserved. Can Shedeur Sanders against an elite defense do well? Can Shedeur Sanders this week against not an elite defense, but a serviceable to good Baylor defense do well? Again, the Bears allow the fewest passing yards of anybody per game in the conference through the first fourth of this season. Can Shedeur Sanders compete against that better than he did against Nebraska, where Colorado put up just 10 points? And honestly, TJ, the assessment for Colorado for me comes more off the field than it does on the field. This is a program with an identity crisis, a culture crisis right now, where week in and week out, we ask, is Shedeur Sanders a competent leader in the locker room? Is his dad, the head coach, a competent leader in the locker room? And I'm still not sure if the answer is yes. You see the conduct that both of them give to opposing teams. His dad won't shake the opposing coach's hand, or Shedeur won't shake the hand of the opposing quarterback. And there's a lot of talk that comes out of Colorado. They're a very tumultuous football program, and that's not a good thing for most Colorado fans who have only seen their school win more than 5-6 games twice in the last 16 years. That's not very good. They want to win in Colorado. This is not the culture to do it long term, but it could work on Saturday against Baylor.
Yeah, so with that, both these teams probably look at the opponent this weekend and think, well, if we're going to go bowling, we've got to pick this one up, just because it gets tougher for both teams. There's no doubt. And I think both teams are somewhat evenly matched. I think ESPN has this as like a 2-point spread, or I think they have Colorado favored like 56% to 44. So it's pretty close. But it's a game where if you lose it, it feels like, man, it's hard to start penciling in too many more wins the rest of the way. Who's the game mean more for?
Yeah, if you're Colorado, it means more for you. You had higher expectations preseason. Baylor could afford on the national scale to go 3-9. Fire Dave Aranda, and ESPN would barely make a headline about it. For Colorado, all eyes are still on you because Deion Sanders is the biggest show in the Big 12. You need to win as many games as possible to keep yourself relevant and to keep Deion Sanders in town. I'm not sure that he's going to be there next season, but the key to him staying is winning a lot of football games, and Baylor's a winnable game. After that, you go to UCF, you face Kansas State, go on the road against Arizona. Those are 3 really tough games for Colorado. So can they keep this momentum of beating Colorado State, starting 2-1 against the Bears? You have to moving forward, because Baylor, thanks to the way their schedule shakes out the rest of the way, actually doesn't have it that hard. The West Virginia game now seems very winnable. The Kansas game seems winnable. Texas Tech seems quite winnable. If the Bears lose to Colorado, they could still reasonably go 5-7, 6-6. The Buffs, they need this one to keep morale, because morale is a very big thing in Deion Sanders' program.
If you're Baylor, what worries you the most about Colorado this weekend?
Their Heisman candidate quarterback or their Heisman candidate wide receiver / cornerback. Now, 2 guys can't win you a football game. We're learning that with Arizona and Noah Fafita, Tet McMillan, who are 2 of the best in the country at what they do. For Colorado, against Baylor, though, I think Travis Hunter is going to get his. I questioned a lot about how good of a wide receiver he would be. Will he be a number 1 target? He's proven to be that for the Buffs. And can he keep that going on the defensive side of the ball? He's proven to do that for Deion Sanders' squad as well. If you're Baylor, I'm worried about 2 names. There's Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter. Past that, I'm not worried about the Colorado defense. I'm not worried about their O-line. I just need to try to bottle up the power that is Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter.
Yeah, Travis did it literally in every way possible. Yeah. And I'll tell you this, as much as like we give them grief for stuff that happens off the field and headlines, seeing the effort, like the effort play of chasing the guy down. Now, Colorado State ended up scoring anyway. Seeing that out of Travis Hunter to me was actually pretty special. Like, obviously, I know he's just like a man among boys, going out and catching the ball and returning interceptions and stuff like that. But the effort play, to me, meant more than anything else that he made to chase that guy down. And I thought that was actually pretty impressive for a team that creates headlines in the worst.
I'll say he's a very good kid in a very rocky culture situation. I think that is true of Travis Hunter.
You mentioned offensive line, defensive line. You know, Colorado has not looked good in trench play really at all. A little bit better against some lower opponents like Colorado State and North Dakota State. Nebraska absolutely ate their lunch. Does Baylor have the advantage there in the trenches? Certainly defensive line to offensive line.
Defensively, for sure. And I think Baylor's linebacking core is good enough that if they send blitzes, they're going to put enough pressure on Shedeur Sanders to make him uncomfortable based on how bad Colorado's offensive line still is. Is it improved from last year? I believe that is a yes, but that's not saying a lot based on how bad Colorado's offensive line was last year. They added 2 key transfers. Let's say 2 of the top 5 offensive line transfers in the Big 12 are currently playing in Boulder. They still grade out to be the 15th or 16th best offensive line in the conference, or better yet, worst offensive line in this league. For a Baylor team that is defense focused, for a Baylor team that held Utah down, especially without Cam Rising, that this is a week where the Bears will attack, play green, as Dave Aranda calls it, defensively. That's what's going to keep them in this game.
What about offensively? Colorado's defense actually in second halves of games, and then really the whole Colorado State game, how much do you take away from that? Yeah. Colorado's defense looks like it's kind of improved in second halves of games. Again, how much of that's Nebraska taking the foot off the pedal? How much of that is, just being so much more talented than a North Dakota State team? I don't know. But is this a game that Baylor, you feel, can get right on offense, or do you think that may still be a struggle on that side?
Oh, that's tough. Yeah, you're looking at a Baylor squad that, again, put up just 6 points against a fairly porous Air Force team in the first half last week and really came on in the second half. If you're looking at 2 teams that are second half focused, I don't think that bodes well for the Bears because at that point, you're going to try to build a lead in the first half. And I don't know if Baylor can do that. They'll have to as a key to victory in Boulder. And the offense, the Bears has still so many questions. Moving from DeQuan Finn as their starting quarterback and their ace to Sawyer Robertson, a kid who is 21 for 29, 315 yards, and has just one touchdown pass, but looked really good when they called his number last week. Then the running back room for Baylor has 4 guys that are getting theirs, from Pendergrass to Reese to Washington to Richards, and they have 4 different ball carriers. They can't decide who the bell cow is going to be on offense. 3 of those guys, Bryson Washington, the freshman included, have rushed for over 100 yards. Can the Bears find their guy offensively? They have to beat a team like Colorado.
It is early. We're recording this on Monday for those that tune in and watch. But do you have an early lean here? I don't know if you've made a pick this early in the week, but what's your lean on this?
It's tough, TJ, because usually I'd go with culture here. Preseason, I had Colorado winning this game. And again, the disciplined squad comes out on top on the road more. But I'm still going to go Colorado. I think the firepower of Colorado, the talent of Colorado, they have more horses in the stable than Baylor, and that's enough at home to eke out a 4 to 7 point win.
Drake, where can people follow you? Where can they find your work?
At Locked On Big 12 on YouTube or wherever you find your podcasts. At LO Big 12 on Twitter as well. Would love to have you.
Awesome. Thanks, buddy.
Always a pleasure.